We've just had the first qualifying session of 2026, and here are the highlights. Now, before the session even got going, it was a race to get Kimi Antonelli's car ready. He had a crash during FP3. Carlos Sainz was also stuck in the garage at the start of qualifying due to electrical issues that occurred during FP3. Unfortunately, in the end, he was unable to get out on track. It was the same story for Lance Stroll, who did not take part in qualifying today due to the lack of power unit parts that Aston Martin are currently struggling with, something that's been well documented so far. It's not been a very good start to the season for them. Now, I was very excited for qualifying to get going, especially because during the practice sessions, 3 different teams with 3 different drivers topped the sessions, so we had no idea really what was going to happen. Early into Q1 and outside of the top 4, it was Audi and Racing Bulls that were the ones to watch, with Bortoleto and Lindblad in particular putting in some quick laps. Inside the top 4, Russell was looking good in the Mercedes, Leclerc in the Ferrari, and Piastri was the fastest of the 2 McLarens. And Hadjar in the Red Bull had put in some decent times, and then when it came to Verstappen's turn to set a lap time, he crashed. He came off of the track. It looks like it was some kind of brake issue with his car, and that was him out of qualifying. And that crash caused a red flag, which was good news for Mercedes because it meant they had more time to get Kimi Antonelli's car out on track, and when they did, he had a lot of catching up to do, and boy did he set a fastest lap of P3. He ended up finishing the session in P6. Great work from him and his mechanics. And at the end of Q1, we lost 6 drivers, and those drivers were Stroll and Sainz, who did not take part, Verstappen, who crashed, Perez and Bottas in the Cadillacs, and Alonso in the Aston Martin. And the top 3 in Q1 were Russell, Piastri and Hamilton. On to Q2, and the start of the session didn't look very good for Ferrari. Leclerc's lap times in particular were just not quick enough compared to the rest of the grid, but in the end he was able to put in a lap fast enough for P2. And by halfway through the session, Hamilton still hadn't set a lap time. He had had 2 attempts but aborted both of them before he was called back into the garage. And when he did come back out on track, his lap time was only fast enough for P6, and in fact the lap time was slower than the one that he had set during Q1. The top 4 teams dominated the Q2 session, with all of the drivers that were still on track in those top 4 teams finishing in the top 10. Outside of that, Racing Bulls had a pretty good Q2 as well, with both their drivers finishing in the top 10, although they did almost crash into each other in the pit lane at the end of the session. The top 3 in Q2, Russell, Leclerc and Antonelli, and we lost 6 drivers during Q2, which were Colapinto, Albon, who briefly went off track towards the end of the session, Gasly, both the Hasses of Ocon and Behrman, and Hulkenberg in the Audi. And although he got through to Q3 in 10th place, Bortoleto was forced to retire from the session when his car couldn't make it back to the pit lane at the end of Q2. And finally, on to Q3. Who was going to get pole? Well, it was looking good for Mercedes, Russell in particular, who had finished Q1 and Q2 in pole position. The Mercedes team caused a red flag early in this session when parts of the cooling system that are used in the garage were left on Antonelli's car, and they then came off of his car whilst he was driving around the track. And unfortunately for Lando Norris, he drove over one of those parts that was on the track and caused some minor damage to his front wing. Once the session resumed, it was clear that Russell was still on top form, his first fast lap putting him at the top of the timing table. Norris was also having a better session. A potential deployment issue with his car during Q1 and Q2 appeared to have been fixed for Q3. However, he was only able to achieve P6 in the end. And when Q3 finished, it was Russell on top, Antonelli in P2, and Isaac Hadjar in the Red Bull in P3. A very good first qualifying session for him with the team. So it looks like the predictions were right. Mercedes are the team to watch this year. Yes, it's only the first qualifying of the year, but it's definitely exciting. And if there's one thing that's been made clear from this qualifying session, it is that the race is going to be unpredictable. We've seen a lot of reliability issues with the teams and their cars since testing a few weeks back, and we just have no idea how that's going to affect them all tomorrow. I think we're potentially going to see a lot of retirements during the race. We'll just have to wait and see. But if you think that last year's Australian Grand Prix was exciting with all of the retirements during the rain, well, you wait until you see this year's race. As always, thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to The Benchmark for more F1 content.